In this video, I'm going to take you through our solar PV and Tesla Powerwall 2 performance and stats, as well as our electric car costs and usage for the month of April 2020. So stay tuned. Hi, John here, and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here and you want to know the details of the system that I'm going to be talking about, well, all the details are down in the description below. So if you have a gander down there, and hopefully that'll give you all you need to know. Also, I put a copy to my spreadsheet down there as well, or a link to the copy of my spreadsheet, which I'm using, and I'll bring examples up on screen. But again, if you want to download that and look at it in more detail, by all means do. So I'm going to take you through the month of April 2020, and throughout the UK in April we were in full lockdown, which basically meant that we left the house for only essential journeys, and essentially that was shopping. So every week or every couple of weeks we went shopping, and that was about it. So as a result, our car mileage has plummeted, and our home electricity usage has also dropped because we're not running glass kilns, because we're not running workshops, etc. So you'll see that manifest itself in the figures. I've also had a home haircut, so this is my home haircut. A buzz cut, number 1 all over, nice and easy. So let's get into the detail. Our first tab that we're going to look at, so I'm still laughing about my haircut for some reason, I don't know why, is our overall solar production. April was wall-to-wall sunshine. There were a couple of days towards the end of the month for us where we had cloud and rain and the odd thunderstorm, and you'll see that impact of that later on when we look at the day by day. But overall, it was a phenomenal month. So our solar PV generation for the month in April, we generated a total of 934 kilowatt hours. I was hoping to hit the magic 1,000, but the last couple of days really were poor, and by comparison to the rest of the month, which was phenomenal, so we saw that target sort of fizzle away, unfortunately. But hey ho. You know, saying that, April for us was our best month ever, which actually I did say in March. March was our best month ever. And I'm sure I'll be saying that in May. May was our best month ever. But anyway, I guess our regular viewers will know that we changed our system in October 2018. We added additional panels, 2.34 kilowatts of additional panels to our existing 4 kilowatt array, which means until we hit October of this year, every month is going to be better than our previous months, like for like, just because we've got a bigger array. But I will split the figures down across the two systems so you can understand how the performance is on a like-for-like comparison. So our original 4 kilowatt system produced 581 kilowatts over the course of April, which was brilliant for that month as well. And as you'll see in a chart coming up in a bit, that it's way ahead of the previous Aprils that we've had. Our new array, the 2.34 kilowatt array, produced 353 kilowatt hours, and that brings us to the total of 934 kilowatt hours, which is just phenomenal, streets ahead of what was a brilliant March. Well, over 200 additional kilowatts over the course of the month, which meant our average was a lot higher as well. We averaged, well, phenomenal 31.1 daily average solar generation over the course of the month. And I thought March was really good, because March figures were 22.4 per day on an average. And that's what we knocked it out of the park with the 31.1 average over the course of the month. Yeah, it was just phenomenal. First time I've seen 40 kilowatts generated in a day on our system. Gone too far. Back, John, get back, get too excited. Let's scroll down and have a look at the self-power and how that worked itself out. And the Tesla Powerwall is now on self-power mode. I swapped it at the beginning of the month from cost-saving mode, which we were all over the winter. So self-power mode means that the sort of algorithm within the Tesla gateway targets to run the house on solar during the day and then battery power once the sun has gone down. And if during the day there's not enough solar to meet the house demand, then the battery will then chip in to provide the extra, providing there's enough charge within the battery. And then once the battery is depleted, it will then pull from the grid. And I'm finding with the longer daylight hours and therefore the more opportunity for sunshine and the improved efficiency of the panels due to the higher angle of the sun, plus the lower temperatures compared to the summer month, the system is a lot more efficient. And we should find that self-powered mode would be a better option for us over cost saving. Because cost saving has the potential to pull from the grid during the off-peak 4-hour slot overnight to top up the battery, which we don't really want and we don't really need to do. So it's great for, cost saving is great for the winter, perhaps late autumn, early spring. But then for late spring, summer, early autumn, cost saving is self-power is a much better option. So we'll see how that sort of maps itself out over the course of the year. As we know, we already had lots of solar, so let's see how that worked out for us with our self-power for April. We were 93% self-powered for the month of April. And if we split that 93% down, 63%, phenomenal amount, 63% was provided by the solar panels. And then the 30% was topped up by the Tesla Powerwall, which meant the remaining 7% came from the grid. Again, our best month ever in terms of self-power. Not for 6 out of the park, as it were, in April. And looking back at it, we would have actually done better than that. I made a bit of a rookie error, which I'll talk about later in the video, which meant it impeded our results slightly. So we would have been actually more efficient than we were. Hey-ho. So let's move on and look at the PV year on year. And this chart tracks our solar production since we've had the system installed. And as you can see here, we track back for April back to 2012. And unsurprisingly, the month of April 2020 towers over the historic data. And the reason for that really is it's not a like-for-like comparison, as they are not like-for-like systems. Therefore, the comparison is a little skewed. As I mentioned earlier, our original 4 kilowatt array produced 581 kilowatts in 2020. So if you compare that to the previous Aprils, back to 2012, you still see it's much, much better than any of the other ones. 2015 is the nearest at 546. Yeah, 581. Brilliant. Really, really happy with that. Yeah, that's enough to say on that one. So let's move along and have a look at how the Powerwall did. So this is our Powerwall in and out chart. We had a round trip efficiency of 91% for the power that we put in and was able to extract from the Powerwall. So the solar panels put in 233 kilowatt hours into the Powerwall and we managed to extract 213. Now these in and out figures are actually quite low, and the reason for that is because the amount of solar that we had. We were able to power the house most of the day just purely on solar. So from about 7 a.m. in the morning through to 7 p.m. at night, almost every day in April, it was solar power that was charging the house, and obviously then the surplus was charging the battery. So the battery only needed to kick in to supply the base load for the house once the sun had gone down. And what I was finding was more often than not, we would start our next solar day with anywhere between 60, even up to sometimes 80% of charge in the battery from where we started at 100% when the sun went down on the previous day. So the battery wasn't used that much at all, but it obviously did contribute quite a lot to our overall self-power. Cool, so let's just have a look at the day by day. Scroll along to that. And this chart, as you probably know, if you're familiar and a regular, I don't go through this day by day. If you're interested in looking at that in more detail, then just pause the video when I bring it up on screen. Or, as I mentioned earlier, the spreadsheet, get a copy of that, and then you're going to have a pore over that in detail if you wanted to. The legend for this, or the key, the blue represents our house usage in kilowatt hours. The yellow bar is our solar production. Orange is what we actually sent to the grid, and then the red is what we pulled from the grid. And a couple of highlights are worth picking out here. Firstly, the red column on the 4th of April. This is where we had a grid pull of 25 kilowatts, which was down to user error. What happened is that I'd left one of the cars plugged into the Zappi overnight, and the Zappi still had our off-peak charge schedule configured into it. So at 12:30 it kicked in and started to charge the car. Okay, it was at a cheap rate, but it meant it pulled 25 kilowatts, which it didn't really need to because there was plenty of sun that it could have charged with the following day or for the rest of the month. But so, yeah, 25 kilowatts down the drain, which was a little bit unfortunate. I always now get into the habit of unplugging the car overnight, because I'm also aware that, certainly with the Zappi charger, that if there's a power outage overnight, and when the power comes back on, the Zappi powers back up and it goes straight into fast charge mode. Therefore, if you've got your car plugged in, it's going to charge up whether you want it to or not. And it'll either, in our case, deplete the battery and then pull from the grid, depending on how much charge is left in the battery. It's not something I want to do, so I make sure I unplug now overnight. The other one to talk about is towards the end of the month, as you'll see there, the pull from the grid. These were the poorer solar days that I was mentioning about, where we had really cloudy days and also thunderstorms. So the 28th, 29th, 30th were mainly a bit of sun, but we were finding that it wasn't enough to be able to sustain us throughout the day and keep the Powerwall charged. So we ran to pulling from the grid. So they're the significant things to pick up on that chart. So let's scroll along and let's look at our daily average. So our daily average usage has dropped considerably for April. And in March, we were running around about 35.8 kilowatts a day on average. And in April, it's fallen down to 25.6. That's obviously as a result of being in lockdown, not running the kilns, etc., etc. So whilst we have been using less, we've also used a lot less from the grid as well. And our daily pull from the grid is now down to 2 kilowatts per day in April. And again, that would have been less if someone hadn't left the car plugged in overnight. But, happy days. So that's tracking the right direction is really the takeaway from that. We'd already been tracking down on grid usage, but since we've moved across to self-power, that has just plummeted really. And it would have been sort of 1 kilowatt a day really if we hadn't had that 25 kilowatts pulled in, and you'll see that in the next chart when we have a look at that. Which brings me neatly on to the next chart. So this is our monthly grid usage. So the first one is what we actually sent to the grid. Oh yes, give you a bit of a background story on this before I nip into the chart. In the March video, I commented on the fact that, and I showed a clip of our Eddi and Zappi and how they were sort of misbehaving really. So with the amount of solar that we had and our sort of wall-to-wall sunshine in April, and being at home 24/7, it gave me a great opportunity to monitor the myenergi setup in more detail. And the clip I showed back in March was showing that it was misbehaving and wasn't reacting to the surplus being exported to the grid. The eddi heats our hot water, and it's set as the master device for the myenergi products. And I was, in March and April, I was monitoring how it was interacting with the Tesla Powerwall and how quickly it cut in and sort of triggered when there was excess solar. And I was finding its behavior was sort of intermittent. It was as it was in March, basically. Sometimes it was perfect, absolutely flawless, and it worked great. And I thought, oh, it's fine. And then the next time, for no apparent reason, it just didn't work. It didn't click in, and it didn't see the excess going out to solar when we were sort of bleeding 5 kilowatts at a time. Because it was intermittent, it was a lot more difficult to troubleshoot. It was like having an intermittent fault on a car. When you take it into the service department for them to look at it, obviously the fault is never there, is it? So it's very difficult for them to diagnose. But luckily I was able to record it. So on the 22nd of April, I raised a support ticket with myenergi. And actually, within 30 minutes of posting it, they tracked down what the fault was with my setup. I'd sent them the video of the system sort of showing its odd behaviour, and from that they were able to identify the issue very clearly. So I'll bring the video up so you can have a look at it. It turns out that the myenergi app was showing a very small flow of between sort of 100 and 200 watts going into the battery, and that prevented the eddi from triggering. And this resulted in the surplus being sent to the grid rather than being diverted to heat the hot water or charge the car. So the fix was really simple. It was to reverse the two wires that were on the CT clamp, which came from the Harvi through to the Powerwall battery. Instantly I'd done that. It transformed the performance of the Zappi and the eddi. And from there on, I was able to sort of monitor the performance. So up until that stage, what was happening in March and for most of April was I was manually intervening to get the Zappi and or the eddi to use the surplus solar. So I'd keep my eye on our smart meter in-house display, and it would then show when we were importing or exporting energy to the grid or from the grid. So once I saw that it was exporting to the grid, I would then check the Powerwall, the Tesla Powerwall app, to make sure that it had fully charged. And then I would then manually boost the eddi or put the Zappi on eco mode to sort of force it to use the surplus. But the downside of that, certainly on the Zappi, was that it was never that efficient, so it would never use the full available surplus. We would still bleed some out. So it would sort of use 1.5 kilowatts of the available surplus, but we would still be bleeding out sort of 3 or 4 kilowatts. So it was whilst it worked to a degree, it wasn't that efficient. But good news is that after swapping the wires over and reversing the flow, the remaining 8 days of the month, i.e. after I'd reported and they'd identified what the issue was and I'd fixed it, the system worked perfectly with no intervention from me at all. So I guess because of the relative inefficiency of the system, we exported sort of 261 kilowatts to the grid, and that would have been a lot less, a lot lower, if the system had utilised all of the surplus, which thankfully now it will be able to do. So that's the story behind that, a bit of a backstory. Scrolling down to look at what we actually pulled from the grid. So we pulled in 60 kilowatts from the grid, which is our lowest ever. And obviously it would have been lower if that 25 kilowatts hadn't been pulled in. In fact, it would have been 42% lower if we hadn't had that 25 kilowatt pull for the charging of the car right at the beginning of April. But hey ho, we are where we are, as they say. So that's it in terms of grid usage. Let's have a look at how the cars fared. Oh, we've got the eddi first. So have a quick look at the eddi. So for the eddi, for the month, we used, or were able to divert 47 kilowatt hours of surplus energy into heating our hot water, which brings the year's running total to 92 kilowatts. And if you base that on best case scenario of 5 pence per unit, which is our cheap rate, which is typically when I would charge from the grid to heat the hot water, we've saved £2.35 for that particular month. We have a running total 165 since we've installed it. So yes, we should see those figures improve as the system is now working at 100%. Moving on, let's have a look at the cars. As I mentioned in the introduction, we haven't really used the cars that much. The Tesla has covered a massive 113 miles during the month and has an accumulative mileage of 3,542. We haven't done any public charging for either of the cars, the Tesla or the Kona. It's all been home charging. The Kona's covered 38 miles during the month of April, and it now has a total mileage of 9,651. So it was home charging. That was the order of the day or order of the month for April. This was tricky really because we didn't use the cars, so I had to rely on them sort of losing power, sort of phantom drain as it's known, to be able to then gain some space in the battery to be able to then charge them. I didn't want to overcharge them either, so it was pointless charging them up to like 100% and just having them sitting there. So I was sort of toggling them between 60 and 80% state of charge. And because it was so hot at certain times, like the Tesla, I was remotely via the app running the aircon or just venting the windows, which you can do from the app, just to take away some of the heat, because sometimes the interior cabin temperature on the Tesla was like 40 degrees. I think, that's probably a bit hot. So by sort of constantly looking on the app, it tended to use the energy from the battery and drain the car a little bit more than it would have been if I'd just sort of ignored it for the month. But that in some respects was a good thing because it allowed me to then be able to top it up when the battery had dropped below 50 to 40%, that kind of thing. So overall, the Zappi pushed 228 kilowatts into the cars. And of that 228, 87% of it was green energy. Obviously, it would have been more. 25 kilowatts. 87% is 200 kilowatts. In terms of the split, 133 kilowatts went into the Tesla and 95 kilowatts went into the Kona. Surplus, the odd 13%, obviously came from the grid, which was 27.87 kilowatt hours. This was pulled during off-peak, so that meant it would be 5 pence per kilowatt, and that works out to £1.39. And that went into the Tesla. So that meant that the 113 miles covered by the Tesla cost us 1 pence per mile, which is good. So that's a nice cheap motoring. And it would have been cheaper as well, but I'll stop going on about that, John. So there you go. That's our stats for April. Let me know in the comments below how you got on, what your system was, what your setup is, what your generation figure is, your sort of keynote bits of information, or as much or as little as you want to share. I just enjoy reading them and responding to those. And yeah, I hope you managed to smash your previous targets too. Talking to loads of people who've got setups, their April was phenomenal as well. So yeah, all good. So That's it. I shall see you on the next one. So take care, stay safe, and speak to you soon. All right, bye.